I thought, well, geez, I better rush up here because I'm a couple minutes late. But what's the rush? It's such a nice summer's day. The perfect day, it seems to me, to be talking about and what could be a very imperfect summer's day, or more likely fall day. So we wanted to use this occasion to talk about hurricanes and a little background to start. So first off, I just want to acknowledge everybody who's here today, including our emergency manager, Brian Nobriga, our police chief, Jason Thody, our fire chief, Brian Medeiros, our port director, Gordon Carr, Jamie Pott, our director of public infrastructure, and Mike Thomas, our EMS director, all here today. Our chief operating officer, Christina Connolly, is over there. We are here to talk about hurricanes and the threat they pose to people and what we can do to keep ourselves safe. I do want to thank the Community Boating Center for hosting us today. Andy Hurley, who's here, who has such a great program here. I want to thank him for graciously hosting us here today, and I will explain in a minute why it is that we picked this spot. So, by way of background, New Bedford, sometimes when I talk about hurricanes in New Bedford to other mayors who live in other regions of the country, they're surprised that New Bedford gets hurricanes, and because hurricanes are so closely associated with more tropical climates. You think Florida, you think Texas, you think the Carolinas, the Outer Banks, right? But not so much here. But the reality is that we are, I guess, with Providence, the two northernmost cities on the East Coast that are hurricane prone, and that's why we have these massive barriers here, these levees. The hurricane barrier here is the largest levee on the East Coast, and it's there for a good reason, because we do have hurricanes really all throughout the settled history of New Bedford, going back to the 18th century, and then most prominently in the 20th century with the 38 hurricane, which was enormously damaging to southern New England and claimed some 600 lives across the Northeast. And then Hurricane Carol in 1954, which was quite devastating to New Bedford in particular. And that was the impetus for the construction of the barrier in the 60s. We're grateful that we have the barrier. I emphasize to people all the time, it should not, for your military history buffs out there, it should not be treated as a Maginot Line. We just have a wall there and then we don't have anything to worry about. It is not the case. It is rated for a Category 3 hurricane, a 16-foot storm surge. But there's a whole lot of land in the city that is not protected, that is fairly low-lying, and we're among those places right now, one of those places right now. And there are dangers even on the other side of the barrier under certain sets of circumstances. So we wanted to talk about that today. We have seen, and we want to emphasize that despite in addition to that history, we watch on television about this time, starting about this time every year, some major storm events. And it's almost like clockwork now. More storms that are more intense, that kill more people, that destroy more property, and that disrupt cities. It happens year in and year out, to the point where you're seeing it, especially in places in Florida, where home flood insurance has skyrocketed to the point where housing in Florida, as much of a housing boom as Florida has had over the last 20 years or so, is starting to make housing unaffordable because it's just too expensive to insure it. Here in New Bedford, we see flood insurance policies getting really expensive because the insurance industry is gauged to those risks very closely. But we don't need to know. You don't need to be an insurance actuarial to know that there's a whole lot of risk here and that we have to deal with it. So what have we? I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing really over the last 10 years or so. It's been a while since we've seen a major hurricane here. Hurricane Bob was the last one here, and a lot of us remember that event. And then there have been close calls. Superstorm Sandy took a hard left turn, people might remember, and landed in New Jersey and New York, but it was headed straight here for a while, for much along its path. And same thing with Hurricane Irene, tropical storm. Briefly, Hurricane Henri, some like 5 years ago or so, roughly. Same thing, hard left turn. We might not get so lucky next time. And so with that in mind, we've been doing a great deal of prep work. One of the threats that hurricanes poses is street flooding. One of the ways we deal with street flooding is to build so-called green infrastructure, which is just replacing hard surfaces with permeable surfaces, grass, stuff that can soak up water. So that's one simple thing. That's a matter of habit now for us. But we've spent millions in upgrading our pumping stations around the city to move water off the streets, out of the stormwater system, and out into the ocean. That investment, headed up by the Department of Public Infrastructure, has put us in a better position to prevent street flooding. We have been doing debriefings after every one of those, not those big storms that have hit us, but storms that have not been quite hurricanes. We've learned from them. We've been informing people about the risks of hurricanes through all manner of media, reverse 911 calls, social media, through all of you guys, through neighborhood groups, doing all that. And we've been rehearsing. We've been doing, in the last few years, and this has been a point of emphasis for Brian Obriga, our emergency manager. We've been doing a whole lot in the way of tabletop exercises, many of them in conjunction with Mass Maritime Academy. They've brought people in, they've walked us through exercises in which we have a hypothetical hurricane coming here with certain hypothetical conditions, and we've learned a lot from those exercises. We are here today to announce a new hurricane plan for the city. The hurricane plan, we've had hurricane plans on the books for decades because, as I said, hurricanes are not new to New Bedford, but there's a whole lot that's happened. There's a whole lot that we've learned. And through the work of all the department heads that you see behind me and others, we've come up with a new plan that we're announcing today. And there's a number of things that are quite the same, right? And the same, that we mobilize and do things as simple as trimming loose trees, loose dead tree branches, and clearing out storm drains and things like that, and setting up shelters and such. That stuff's not altogether new, but there are some things that are really important to point out that are new, that are up to date, and that we believe and we're confident match up with the new reality that we face. So let me just tell you a little bit about them. So the one of the partners that we've worked with is the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, which together with NOAA, as well as research institutions like Woods Hole, has come up with a new set of flooding zones. So we are in Zone A, if you can't tell. Zone A being sort of the one most prone to storm surge and flooding. And then Zone B is further inland. So you think of these zones as sort of concentrically moving out from the coastline. Those areas that might need to be evacuated are, of course, called out in order. So Zone A is the place that is most likely going to be called out first for evacuation. So that's something that we've been talking about with the public for a little while, but it's baked into our plan now. And the thing that we want people to know is to be sensitive about is to know your zones. Know your zones. If you're in Zone A, you better stay awake. You better be alert because, as I'll explain in a minute, the flooding can be real, and flooding might prompt you to evacuate. Another thing, the second thing I'd say is is different about this plan is that there's a whole lot more detail concerning the timeline of actions to be taken. We know with greater precision nowadays than we had in the past the trajectory of hurricanes. The models, right? Every time we watch hurricane coverage on on the Weather Channel or on the national networks or the local networks, wherever it is, you hear about the European model, the American model. There are all these models. It's almost sounds like a fashion show, all these models around, right? But all kidding aside, we have better information about the potential track of a storm. And so what we try to do is to give people a sense of, all right, well, what's the risk? We hear these terms like cone of uncertainty and things. Those things matter. That's very relevant for us to plan. And so what our plan has in place is sort of step by step what we start doing 5 days out, 4 days out, 3 days out, 2 days out, 18 hours out, 12 hours out, 6 hours out from landfall. So and like any plan, there's got to be some level of flexibility to adjust under changing circumstances, but at least that gives us a structure for the public and for our city agencies to understand what's to be done. So the timeline is very important, and we can have that in place now because the models have evolved to a point that allow that. There is a greater outlining of roles of individual departments, right? In the case of a big incident, the police department will serve as the incident command. That was left unclear when we reacted to Hurricane Irene some 12 years ago or so. I've been in office for that long. There was a whole lot of confusion, even in this very neighborhood, about who's in charge. You don't want that. We want to everybody needs to know who's in charge of the entire incident once it starts to unfold. In that case, it's the police department. But other roles are defined very clearly as well in this plan. The last thing that's very different is that there's such a much more heavier emphasis on evacuation and sheltering. So, and again, this is something that we've talked about a lot. We're here on Padanaram Avenue today to make a point. This is the lowest point in the city, and over even just in my time in office, we've seen a visceral change in the way that storms affect this very street. 15 years ago or so, 12 years ago or so, it was pretty rare to see any kind of flooding on the street here. And as Brian Nobrega will tell you, nowadays it's a more common occurrence. 3 or 4 times a year. We've had some years where we've seen flooding up to 5 times, like right up this ramp, all the way up here, all the way up to Padanaram Avenue. And so this is really for us. It's all in plain view. We've got to look at this and say, how. It won't take much of a storm. It won't take a Category 4 hurricane for this neighborhood to be completely flooded, even for some of these houses to be wiped out. And so people have to be aware of that. And so the plan talks specifically about how we would evacuate these neighborhoods. And as we started doing that in Hurricane Irene, which again just dealt a glancing blow to the city. But what we have here is you have a series of streets leading sort of softly, gradually up the hill that are prone to flooding. We want people in this neighborhood, as well as on the peninsula over my left shoulder, on both sides, all lying outside the hurricane barrier, to have in their heads that you may need to split if a bad storm comes. It's always, and this happens even in Florida where there are more frequent big storms. You have this problem of people like thinking, it's not really worth it. I don't need to do it. I think most people, if they evacuate, they're going to go somewhere they're familiar with, to a relative's house or a friend's house on higher land. And it doesn't have to be in the mountains of Vermont. It could be in the north end of New Bedford, somewhere that's a field of the storm. But what we want people, if there's anything that is like the single most important takeaway from this entire press conference, people should have. If you live in one of these areas, you should have in the back of your head what you're going to do if you have to leave. Where you're going to go, what stuff you're going to gather up, whom you're going to call. It is commonsensical, but what we want people to do is, look, it's great to have a waterfront home, to enjoy the scenery and all that, but it comes with risks and the age we live in, and you have to have in the back of your head that you're going to leave if things start to get risky. So that is the single biggest takeaway from today's exercise. So I want to emphasize that to everybody, especially if you live here on Padanaram Avenue. So we've been pushing out that messaging for the last few months. We've been going to neighborhood group meetings and doing 911 reverse calls and such to sensitize everybody to it. So that's, our and we will continue to do that. We don't want to sound alarmist. We don't want any of the messaging to sound Chicken Little-ish. The sky's not falling. We're here on a beautiful day, but we have to take these risks seriously, and that's what we're doing. I do want to say that this is like any other set of messaging. There is a need to repeat it. So, and to come back to it just as a refresher so that everybody's alert to it. We've been talking about hurricanes for a while, but we wanted to hold this press conference today because you're hearing this is the time of year when the news starts, right? In fact, even this week there's discussion around tropical depressions off the Cape Verde Islands. That's how the coverage starts all the time, and so we want people to be thinking about that. So with that in mind, today I'm going to declare in New Bedford, ready for this, August 6th, today August 6th, as Hurricane Preparedness Day. So happy Hurricane Preparedness Day to all those who celebrate, of course. We don't make a big to-do of it, but it is an occasion for us to come back to this set of messaging every year. You can overload people with this kind of messaging, and so people start to sort of, like they do in everything else these days in our social media world, start to disregard important messages because they're caught up in the maw of all the other stuff you hear every day. But what we want to do is we want to say, look, every year we're going to come back. If it's not necessarily a press conference, but we want to return to the idea that we all have to deal with this. And that way, look, at the end of the day, the business of government, the foundational purpose of government is to keep people safe. That's what we do. That is the core of our job, and this is why we're having this discussion today. So we will plan to come back to this every August so that people are reminded. And you know what? The next hurricane might not be this year. It might not be in the next 5 years. But it is not a question of if, it is a question of when. It is a certainty that we will be hit with a hurricane because we live where we live. And if we stay on top of things, we will save lives and save property and preserve all those things that we hold dear. So with all that, I want to call up, again, I want to thank all the department heads for their contributions to the plan. It's a really thoughtful plan. I commend it to everybody. But the person who headed it up is Brian Obriger, our emergency management director, who did a fabulous job pulling everybody together and getting that input and getting really what is as good of a plan as really anywhere in the U.S., I think. And I want to have him come on up and say a few words about how people should be thinking about it. Brian, where are you? There you are.
Thank you. All right. Good morning. Thank you, Mayor. So I'll just emphasize what the mayor said. My first real job was down here at Community Boating back in 2002. I was down here during Superstorm Sandy, and the water 12 hours before was barely into the barely into the boatyard over here. This past December, actually 2 Decembers ago, we were hit by 4 major winter storms with a southerly wind, high tide, and I've never seen the water as high as it was before. Probably Hurricane Bob when Irene lived here, but the water is coming up in this area. This, like the mayor said, this area here is right at sea level. Up the street over here, it's only about 3 to 5 feet, according to National Weather Service. So this is our ground zero. So we want all the neighbors, all the residents to take this area of Padanaram Ave very seriously with Know Your Zone. Okay, it's a tool that is offered by MEMA. You just type your address in, and it'll tell you what zone you're in. If you're in Zone A, you really want to make a plan for evacuations. Okay, and like the mayor said, you don't have to go to Maine, New Hampshire. You just got to get outside of the evacuation zone. We do, in the event of an evacuation, the city, with partnering with MEMA and American Red Cross, will open up an emergency shelter, and that would be at Keith Middle School. Okay, and the reason why we picked Keith Middle School is it has a generator, has food supply, and it's outside of Zone A and Zone B. Okay? The other thing that I want to emphasize too is a tool called NB Alert. It's our reverse 911 system. Residents can sign up for that right on the website. Just type in nbalert.com and you'll be able to get all our emergency notifications that way. They might seem a little annoying at times. We use it a lot for missing persons, any emergency information, parades. It's a great tool to get that message out, and it can go out in either email, voice, and text message, and it does go into different languages. As the mayor said, this was a team effort. All these gentlemen and all the other departments like Gen Vieira and DFFM, the school department, the airport, we all worked together to build this plan, along with a couple other emergency plans that we're going to be releasing in the next, say, 6 months. One thing that you guys want to do right now is make an emergency kit. Get all your items together, medications for 3 days, have a plan, clothing. You know, if we open up a shelter, we don't want you to come with 9 suitcases like you're going on a Royal Caribbean cruise. Just bring what you need for 3 to 5 days. We'll have the basic items there like cots, pillows, and stuff like that. But, it's not a great hotel, but it's a way to keep you safe until you can get with another family member. I just want to emphasize that we really took the evacuation seriously, and we put the police chief and his team in charge of evacuations. That's so we have one leader going to all these houses door to door if we need to, and then across the way in Clark's Cove with PA announcements. If you see water, you need to know your zone. If you can see water within 5 steps, you need to know your zone. Zone A, you really need to pay attention, and then there's another zone called Zone B. That's for more major hurricanes. We also took into account the hurricane barrier only does a certain section of the peninsula, so we're considering those people Zone A as well, because they're going to get effects as well from the hurricane, like the strong winds, and hopefully we'll never see a hurricane that floods Brock Avenue, but that's our main emergency route out of the south end. Brock Avenue to Route 18, and then this area is from here to Rockdale Ave. And basically, it's a team effort. We all the gentlemen behind us, we get together and we make a recommendation to the mayor, and the mayor makes that decision. We work together, and then that's the only way we're going to keep this city safe and be able to come back from a major hurricane. And at this time, I think that's about it. Thank you.
No, that was a good summary. And again, these details can be found in the plan and on the website. Easy for people to track down. Again, I want to thank all the department heads who contributed to this: the fire department, the port, DPI, and emergency medical, and many others. A number of state agencies as well. I do, as I said, as Brian alluded to. It is really important for people to understand that they might get a knock on the door from the police to telling them it's time for you to leave. And so I wanted to call our police chief, Jason Doty, up to say a few words about the police's incident command and just in general how an evacuation notice, personal notice from the police department might work. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. The Mayor and Brian did a great job of summarizing it, and the plan is very thorough and it's online, so I won't go through the details of the plan. But, the good thing in the last couple decades is getting the word out is much easier now, so we encourage, especially people in the Zone A area, we encourage them to pay attention. Social media, the reverse 911 system, those are all early ways to kind of know that you have to be paying attention. Beyond that, when we get into the actual evacuation stage, we will be using public address. So we want people to know that they should be listening for those public address systems. If you don't know that's coming, it can be alarming. So that kind of goes with preparation, right? Reading a little bit about the plan ahead of time, knowing kind of what to expect. So when it happens, it's not surprising and it's not alarming. But if I'm knocking on your door with rubber boots on, it's time to go. Our officers will go door to door. We do have specifics in the plan to deal with folks that may be elderly, folks that may be disabled, folks that may need assistance evacuation. There's transportation plans in there so that we can get folks out. But what's most important for an organized and effective evacuation is that people communicate, they listen to the communications, that they're orderly. So that means kind of having, as the mayor said, that mindset about what you're going to do, where you're going to go, so that there's not panic. That's what's important, is to keep things orderly and keep things calm. Listening to instructions of the officers. We will have a lot of personnel here if we have the unfortunate incident of having to evacuate this area or the peninsula or everywhere, and having a general knowledge about where you're going. As Brian said, Route 18, Rockdale Ave, knowing kind of where you're going to be heading. And then just a sense of urgency. If we're evacuating, if we're initiating an evacuation, that's real. And you hear stories all the time about folks that don't take it seriously, and they end up, unfortunately, either injured or stuck or even worse. So that's kind of the message: is expect to see us. We will assist, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. We will have all that information, and there's an abundance of information available on the website. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. And one thing to point out too is that sometimes when we've talked to people about evacuating in advance of a storm, they say, "Well, what about my dog? What about my cat?" and so forth. And so the plan addresses all that as well. We have pet-friendly shelters for folks. So that's something we don't want people to. We want to remove every barrier to the necessary evacuation of neighborhoods that are prone to storm surges and flooding. So that's something that again the plan addresses and accommodates. So again, I'll open it up for questions. I do want to say I want to thank all the media in attendance, because this is the kind of thing when the wind isn't blowing and there aren't white caps out there and waves crashing, it's kind of hard to say, well, what's the big deal? This is exactly when we should be talking about it, to inculcate the idea that, if you live here in a place like this, it comes, as nice as it is, it comes with risk, but there are ways of managing that risk for your own and your family's personal safety. So with all that, appreciate everybody getting the word out, and I'll open it up.
That 911 system, can you just repeat the name of it?
Yeah, so it's mbAlert.com. mbAlert.com. Yeah, thank you. Yep.
I'm Brooke Cushwaha. I'm with the New Bedford Light. I just started last week.
Welcome to New Bedford.
I'm from Houston, Texas, so hurricanes are very topical.
Yeah.
What cities, if any, have you modeled this preparation plan after? Have you been talking with other mayors, and what have you learned from other places?
Well, I think Brian could offer more detail, but a lot of the core of the plan is not dissimilar from city to city. You mobilize certain city assets to both prep the city for landfall, and then to keep people safe, and then for the aftermath. But I don't know if you want to speak to the.
I would say MEMA is the biggest help. Every community is different, so you can get ideas, but you really got to draft your own plan.
Yeah, I think look, things are different, and again, there's a certain set of things that every city should be doing, including sensitizing, if you are in a area that's prone to these storms, sensitizing the public to it. But every city's different. Like, we're the only city that has that massive wall there, right? And which is good, but there's a way of thinking about that wall that's important, and how we respond in terms of the way we move water out, in terms of where we evacuate is peculiar to New Bedford. And so I suspect, honestly, that a lot of others, I hope, will be modeling themselves after us for the sake of their own residents.
When people are putting together their kits, is there anything you really stress that they bring along with them or pack with them, or do you kind of leave that up to them, their discretion, for them to kind of choose it on their own side of the issue?
Yeah, definitely not 9 suitcases worth, as Brian said, but you want to speak to that a little bit?
So the big thing, and as Director Thomas just whispered in my ears, is medications, right? We bring 5 days worth. We can, Chief Medeiros and I, we worked after the Washburn Street fire, get medications and stuff like that. They're very hard to get. So I would say that if you see a storm coming, make sure you have 5 days worth of medication for after the storm, and then just bring comfort items. You can bring your own pillow, but bring comfortable clothes. You're going to Keith Middle School, you're going to be sleeping on a cot, at worst case scenario. But the biggest thing is medications, and like the mayor said, we're pet friendly. That was a big change after Hurricane Katrina, is in order to be declared and get that federal funding from FEMA, you have to be pet friendly. And the police department has animal control, and they'll be down there, so bring stuff for your dog as well.
Yeah, and Brian mentioned FEMA, and look, FEMA's been in the news a lot lately, and its future is uncertain. I suspect there will be something in the way of continuing to be a federal agency that runs point for the federal government on major disasters, but how FEMA looks in the long run may be different from what we've been accustomed to. But all the more reason, frankly, why we're taking the bull by the horns here, and that's and have been a while. We're announcing the plan today, but the plan's really a culmination of a lot of work that's been ongoing, and so that's just look. That's the way we do things here. Anybody else? Yep.
Are you taking into account uncertainties with the National Weather Service and NOAA's ability to predict or model
Because of cuts at NOAA, you mean? Or yeah, look, NOAA's a very reliable source of weather forecasting. It's not the only one. So even with snowstorms, we use multiple sources. The folks who are right by your side, 6, 10, and 12, but we also look at NOAA. We also have our own subscription service. And we do that so that we can have as precise of a forecast of what we'll be dealing with. All right, Matt.
When's the last time there was a big hurricane evacuation in the city? Did it happen during Bob?
I think that's a good question. Did it happen during Bob? We started to do it during Irene. So the police and fire departments started knocking on doors in this neighborhood. I was down here at the time. We were watching, just to give you a sense of it. This was all underwater here. The beaches were, and there was a wall. There's a wall over there, and we're watching it right at the predicted high tide time of day, and it got right up to the top of the wall and didn't go any further. So we said, okay, we got to stop trying to evacuate people. But we had already started knocking on doors. As far as Bob goes, I don't remember. Do you guys have a sense of?
5.
Yeah. You weren't a 5-year-old knocking on doors out here.
I was on Aquinic Street, but I do remember the police going around saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a while ago. But all the more reason. Look, the storm, obviously, storms happen much more frequently and they're much more intense. So if you're in Houston, right? Houston got 54 inches of rain in that the last big hurricane that hit there, and that's very well in it. Houston doesn't get a storm surge, right? But it gets massive flooding, and Houston was a classic example of the need to have more permeable surfaces, right? Because the rain couldn't go anywhere, right? It just flowed across concrete and asphalt. So again, these are all things that we have to consider and just be alert to it. Again, the purpose here is not to be alarmist. It's just people should stay on their toes this time of year if you live in an area that's low lying and near the coast. All right. Yes, sir.
So say someone's language bound, right? They can only speak one English aside from English. How would that work?
Yeah, well, we put out alerts in multiple languages, 911 calls and such. Yeah, that's what we do.
And we also have police officers available as well.
Yeah, police officers as well. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate the coverage of this stuff. It's important for the public to know. Thanks a lot.